Hi guys, 2.6 kinetic energy is the next lesson. So kinetic energy, if we just review for a moment, kinetic is a word that means motion. So anything that's in motion, it's moving, is going to have kinetic energy. When something is moving, it has a speed. We've already studied a few formulas that have V in them. V standing for speed or velocity. So the kinetic energy formula has three things in it. Kinetic energy, of course. This is measured in joules. It has a 1/2, so you can use 0.5. It has M, which is mass measured in kilograms, and it has V, which is speed, which we know is measured in meters per second. So let's go straight into our one and only example here. We've decided during COVID that we're not going to have you isolate this formula for M or V. If you've signed up for Physics 20, however, you can go ahead and try the last two slides. I've left them in the notes. They do have examples where you plug all your numbers in and you do algebra to get M by itself or V by itself. You definitely have the math skills to do this. The only thing that you might not know is what the opposite of squaring is. But if you were to guess, you might find out that the opposite of squaring, you guessed it, is square rooting. So you should have the algebra skills to do those if you chose to take Physics 20. For COVID, we're just going to do equations where we get the energy. So I'm going to give you the mass, give you the speed, you plug them in the equation, and really you just have to make sure you're putting it in your calculator right and you're good to go. So here's our example. A car, mass 1,500 kilograms, and that's 4 sig digs, travels at 25.2 meters per second. What is its kinetic energy? 3 sig digs is what I'm circling. That will be our final answer. So what are we given? Mass. We're given meters per second, so we need to know that that means speed. For some of you that struggle with physics, you may want to take some time to memorize what the units tell you. If you write it down like 27 times on a piece of paper, speed, meters per second, speed, meters per second, then you should have it memorized. What is the kinetic energy? That's our question mark. So we look on our formula sheet and we find this formula. So we write it down. It's very important that you're writing your work properly in physics. Don't skip any of the steps that I'm teaching you. Then we sub our numbers in. I'm going to leave 1/2 because I know from my experience, students tend to get pretty lazy and put 0.5 in. That's fine. 1/2 is the same as 0.5, but the problem comes in later math and science classes when we use fractions like a third. If you put 0.3 in for a third, you're 100% wrong. 1/3 is 0.3 repeating. And if you round it off to be 0.3, you're going to get a number that is not accurate at all. Just like when we use pi, we don't say 3.14, we use the pi button in our calculator so that it uses all the decimals. Same idea here. I'm going to use 1/2 just so I'm practicing with my brackets on my calculator. I'll talk about that in a minute. Next comes mass. So I'm going to multiply by my 1,500 kilograms. Notice that I'm writing everything with units because this is physics. And next comes speed. But in the formula, speed is squared. So I need to square it. Now there's some important things here. The squared has to go on the outside of the bracket. Some students get confused and they think that the squared applies to the units, which technically it does, but we don't have to go there in Science 10. You're squaring the number. So when I put this in my calculator, I am going to literally put bracket 1/2 bracket bracket 1500 bracket, and bracket 25.2 bracket squared. All right, make sure you try that in your calculator and get the same number as me. I'm getting a really big number actually, 476,280. And I'm just writing this down because we're learning, but our answer needs to be written with 3 sig digs, remember. So how do we write a number that has 6 digits with fewer numbers? The only possible way is scientific notation. So I need to do 3 digits at the front of the number, and I need to force a decimal somewhere that makes it a number between 1 and 10. 4.76 is a number between 1 and 10. Now this last digit might get rounded. In this case it doesn't because there's a 2 after it. But if there was a 5 or above after the 6, you would round it to 4.77. So here we go, 4.76 times 10 to the power of how many decimal places do I have to move to get the decimal where it actually started? And remember, in a number like this, we never write it, but the decimal's at the end. So how many spots do I have to move to get from the decimal between the 4 and 7 here to the red? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Your exponent is 5. Now, energy, you're just going to have to memorize this, has joules as its unit. And there's your final answer. So really the most complicated thing is how do we put this in our calculator? So I'm just going to show you exactly what my calculator screen looked like. Everything was in brackets. Like this. And then I squared the last number. You have to make sure that you're only squaring the 25.2 and not all of the numbers. So I really recommend that you practice putting it in your calculator exactly how you see it there with the brackets and everything. So that's it for kinetic energy. Like I said, we do have 2 examples here where I'm isolating for mass and velocity using algebra. So those of you who took Physics 20 are welcome to go through those examples and ask me for help if you need it. But for our purposes during this pandemic, we won't be studying those examples. So your next task is to do the practice questions, check your answers, and email me with any questions that you have. We can always video chat if you need some help walking through these steps.